Welcome to the Explainer. So, what if the faiths we know today are actually, well, corroded versions of their original radical message? Today, we're going to dig into this powerful idea from our source material called Imperial rust. It's a concept that suggests many religions have been totally reshaped by empire. We're going to see how they measure up against a reconstruction of a much older, pre imperial faith.
And that brings us to the central question, right? What happens when a spiritual movement gets tangled up with state power? Can a path that was designed for personal transformation actually survive when it becomes a tool for political control? This is the fundamental conflict we're going to be looking at today.
To answer that, we first have to get a handle on this key term from our source material. The author calls this corrosive process imperial rust. So what exactly is it?
Imperial rust is that exact moment, that tipping point, when a radical spiritual idea goes through what's called a Constantinian shift. And yeah, it's named after the Roman Emperor Constantine, the guy who basically turned Christianity into an engine of the state. The purpose of the faith completely pivots. It's not about your individual spiritual health anymore. Nope. It's about creating stable, obedient citizens for the empire. So how do you spot this rust out in the wild? Well, the source gives us 5 key signs. First, followers get demoted. You're no longer an active partner, you're a passive subject. Then the goal shifts. It's not about spiritual depth anymore, it's just about getting more people in the pews, what the author kind of cynically calls imperial units. Third, the enemy changes. It stops being an internal struggle, like your own dishonesty, and becomes an external one, like a rival nation, which makes it really easy to justify wars. Salvation also gets simplified. It becomes this passive transaction, like a get-out-of-jail-free card, instead of the hard work of actually repairing the world. And finally, the original messenger, they often get elevated to godhood. See, it's a lot safer for an empire to have a figure to worship from way over there than a revolutionary example to actually follow.
Okay, so to detect this rust, our source proposes a framework. It's a reconstruction of what it calls a pre-imperial faith, named the Way. Just think of it as our baseline, like a piece of spiritual pure iron that we can use to test the integrity of other belief systems.
And this slide, this is where it really all comes together. Look at this. An imperial faith is all about salvation and unity, getting subjects to heaven. But the Way? It's about tikkun, that's a Hebrew term, for repairing this world. In one, you're a passive subject. In the other, you're a humkar, a co-worker. The messenger, Yeshua, the Hebrew name for Jesus, isn't seen as God the Son to be worshipped, but as the general leading the charge. The whole focus just shifts from escaping the world to fixing it. So the crucial point boils down to this. What's your role? A subject is passive, they're dependent, they're saved just by believing. They obey a distant king. But a co-worker, that's an active agent, responsible for their own spiritual discipline and alignment. They don't just obey, they fight right alongside their general. It's a totally different job description. All right, so let's move on to the analysis and see how this actually plays out. Which global faiths resonate most strongly with the principles of the Way? Which ones show the least amount of this so-called imperial rust? The results from the source's analysis are, well, they're pretty fascinating. On a compatibility score out of 100, both the Quakers and the Quranists, and by that we mean Muslims who stick only to the Quran and reject later traditions, they both score a remarkable 75%. And the ancient Persian faith of Zoroastrianism is right behind them at 70%. So let's break down why. Quakers score so high because their core beliefs naturally resist imperial control. I mean, think about it. Their concept of an inner light in every single person completely decentralizes spiritual authority. You don't need a priest or a pope. Their rejection of hierarchy and their fierce pacifism directly contradict the imperial need for subjects and soldiers. And at their core, they are all about repairing the world through social justice, which is basically the definition of tikkun. And this slide, this really shows the deep historical roots of the Way. Zoroastrianism is identified as its foundational cosmic engine. It sees the world as fundamentally good and views humans as essential co-workers in the fight against chaos and lies. This is the blueprint for that active world-affirming spirituality that imperial rust always tries to suppress. Okay, so we've seen what high compatibility looks like. But what about the other end of the spectrum? What does fundamental incompatibility look like? Let's apply this lens to faiths that, according to the source, are on the complete opposite side.
For the prosperity gospel, the compatibility score isn't just low, it's 0, a perfect 0. So why such a stark, absolute result? The framework presents this as the difference between a vending machine and a construction site. It's a great analogy. The prosperity gospel's goal is personal accumulation. The human is a consumer, you put in faith to get out blessings. And wealth? That's the proof of divine favor. But the way is a construction site. The goal is global renovation. The human is a coworker responsible for building. And wealth? Well, wealth is just a tool. It's neutral energy that you can either use for repair or let it become an idol.
The source document really just boils it down to this one powerful idea. The prosperity gospel creates consumers of religion. The way creates builders of reality. I mean, it's all about what you're being trained to do, consume or build.
The analysis finds a similar incompatibility with what it calls mainstream evangelicalism, but for different reasons. It all comes down to the end game. Is the point to escape a sinking ship called Earth, to lock down your spot in the next life? Or is it to stay and restore this world, to engage in the Zoroastrian concept of frashokarity, the making of reality fresh again? The core questions they ask just reveal two fundamentally different missions.
So after running all these different faiths through this unique lens, we're left with a really clear fundamental divide. It's a divide between two completely different identities. And ultimately, the source suggests this framework isn't about judging which religion is right or wrong. It's really an analytical tool, and it's designed to make us ask a much more practical question. What kind of person is your belief system actually engineered to produce? Does it create a passive subject just waiting around for a rescue, or an active builder taking responsibility for repair?
And that leaves us with this final, really challenging thought from the source material. It frames the entire spiritual journey as a choice. The path of the empire, the path coded in rust, it demands your submission, and in return, it offers you safety. But the path of truth, the path of the coworker, that demands your personal sovereignty, and in return, it offers you responsibility. A powerful choice to think about.